Shabbat Shalom, guys. Good to see you all. Excited and just come to be in the presence of the Yahweh and each other, and just come to spend some good time with each other. And it's always good that we do that. We're going to talk a little bit today about forgiveness and reconciliation. Understand these are not the same thing. In order to reconcile, there has to be forgiveness in some aspect, but forgiveness does not always include reconciliation. And so we're going to address some of these things today, and we know, just to kind of cut to the chase, Yeshua said, when you're there and you're praying, forgive, because the Father forgave you. And if you can't forgive your brothers, there's an issue there. You know, if you can't forgive one another, there is a problem. There is an issue there, because Yahweh says that He has given us forgiveness, but He wants us to be able to extend the same to one another so that we can learn to dwell together. How does the Scripture say? In unity. Psalm 133, right? Hine matov, right? Behold how good and pleasant it is for brothers to dwell how? Together in unity. See, we can be in proximity of one another and not be in unity. You ever experienced that? Yeah, so that's not what we're shooting for. We want to be together and in unity. And as Eileen said earlier, I think she said it well, that, you know, to be in unity with one another doesn't mean we think exactly the same way or exactly the same things, or we dress alike or look alike or sound alike. No. Matter of fact, if you ever are in a situation where it has to be this way and this way and this way, it's one of two situations. Either you're in the military or you're in a cult. You know, but the Father has called us to be like-minded, to have the same purposes, the same goals, to be working towards the same things, but we don't have to, you know, do exactly the same things the same way. That's why we are different parts of the body. We're called to be different parts of the body, which means each part has its own function, its unique way of doing things. I mean, even the difference between the left hand and the right hand, it does things differently, right? You guys, how many of you guys have a dominant hand? You know, you're left-handed or right-handed, right? You ever try to do something with your non-dominant hand that you normally do with your dominant? It's clumsy, isn't it? You know, like try writing. You try writing and say, I'm left-handed. I cannot write right-handed. I can barely write left-handed. Okay? I bowl left-handed. And I'm not good at it, but I bowl left-handed. But Lord help me if I try it right-handed. Someone's going to get hurt. You know, this is the idea. Even within ourselves, we see within ourselves how the body relates to each other. Okay? And so it does things differently. So we have to be in a position where we can allow the body to do its function. All right? Excuse me, guys, got a little frog in the throat today. So forgive me about that, okay? I might get a little excited. I might cough a little bit if I do. So just be warned about that. Okay. Now that I've done that in your ears, let's start off with this. Are we choosing to gather or are we choosing to scatter? What is that? Paul's? Yeah, I'll take one. For the sake of y'all, I'll take one. So are we choosing to gather or are we choosing to scatter? Let's look at this. Matthew 12:30 says, he who is not with me is what? Against me. Thanks, Joshua. Thanks, Faith. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me, what? Scatters. See, so what we find here, there's something active going on here where you're doing one or the other. You see that? You're either doing one or the other. It's not really a middle ground in there, because Yeshua says if you're not gathering with me, you're scattering. Which means we have to actively gather then. It means we have to actively be about the Father's business in the kingdom, being in the fields and trying to gather in the people and gather in the different parts that He's called us to, right? So with us, if we're gathering, it will be seen by a desire in our heart to gather the people of Yahweh and to come into a place of unity together. We will have the opportunities to work redemptively and restoratively. I'm not just talking about, you know, meeting weekly on Shabbat, which is a good thing, but I'm talking about an overall and in general of gathering in with the people of Yahweh and being like-minded and being together in unity. Right? Now, the more often we get the chances to do that, the better it is. But we've got to be able to see the Father's heart in all of this. Because That's our purpose. That's our goal, is to have his kingdom here. And if we're stuck in, someday, somehow, some way, we're just going to get through, barely make it through here, but someday it's going to get better, we're kind of missing the point. Because we're looking at a relationship with Yahweh as in, well, I'm his, and he said he's leading me, but not really yet. No, he said he'll do this now. And so it's not a matter of saying, we're following God and someday, somehow in the future, he's going to take care of it. I put it this way. He was, he is, and he will forever be. Okay? So in that process, though, a lot of times we get stuck. Because we either get stuck in the process of he is the God who will be. In other words, we're always looking, well, I guess tomorrow will be better. Well, I guess tomorrow. Well, I guess tomorrow. Next week. Or I guess next year. So we're always looking to somehow something later. Or the God who was, well, I know he did it yesterday, but is he going to do it today? I know he did things before, but what's going to happen now? So the thing is, we look back to what the Father has done for us. We look forward to the promises that he has for us that will be, but do not forget he is the God who is. And he was the one who wants us to dwell together with him now. And so that's going to have an impact on how we live our life and gathering in together with his people. Okay? All right. Let's start off with a few things here. 1 John 1, 6 through 7 says, if we say we have fellowship with him and we keep walking in darkness, what does the scripture say? We're lying, and we do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship with, what does it say? Louder? One another. And the blood of his son, Yeshua, purifies us from all sin. See, so it says if we walk in the light as he is in the light, it's not just a matter of that we are walking and dwelling in unity with him. Because he says if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. So in other words, again, we come back to which is the most important commandment? Well, obviously, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength, right? And then Yeshua said, by the way, there's another one that you're forgetting. It needs to be right there with that one. What is it? Love your neighbor as yourself. See, he's like, you got this, but understand this goes with it. So if we love Yahweh, then we're going to show his heart towards what he loves. And he loves his people. He loves all that he's redeemed. Okay? And then we read that, John 3:16, right? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So he draws us to him, and if we love him, then we're going to love whom and what he loves. So that we can dwell in unity with him. Right? 1 John 2, 9 through 11. The one who says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness. See, so when we just read earlier, it said, so if you're dwelling in darkness, you're not dwelling in light. Paraphrasing, but that's it, right? And here, we see that if you hate your brother, you're dwelling in darkness. So again, we're kind of defining a few things here. Okay? So this is what he says. If he says he's in the light and he hates his brother, he's in darkness. And the one who loves his brother abides in light, and in him there is no cause for stumbling. But whoever hates his brother is in darkness and walks in the darkness, and he doesn't know where he's going because the darkness has made his eyes blind. You ever try getting up in the middle of the night and there's no light, and you're familiar with your surroundings and you're stumbling over things? This is what Yeshua is telling us. If we're not dwelling in the light, then we're going to be stumbling over things. We're like, I thought I knew where this was or where that was. But you're going to be stumbling over these things because it's easy to get tripped up if you're in darkness. So how do we get out of the darkness? Live in the light. How do we live in the light? Yeshua says he is the light of the world. So how do we live in the light? Walk in the light as he is in the light. Well, how did he walk in the light? Thy word is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. So in other words, that lamp, that fire that is in the lamp that is in there is the light, the word of the living God. If we put that in us, then we can walk in the light and dwell in the light. But then if we put the word in us, something happens, guys. We become accountable to the word that he has put within us, which means change is required. And that's the beautiful part of it. Because if we allow him to put his word within us, we will change. And it's not going to be us that's doing the changing. It's going to be Him that's doing the changing. All we have to do is submit ourselves to the process. See? And so as we turn ourselves to Him and submit ourselves to Him, then He's going to draw us closer to Him, to be more like Him, and to walk in the light, and to be that light in the world that's shining in the darkness. And how do we do some of this? We've got to learn to dwell together. Now, sometimes that's an amazing thing, but let's face it. We all have different personalities. We all have different issues in life. We all get different things, and I know we shouldn't, but let's be honest. We have good days and bad days, right? You know, some of us are morning people. Some of us are not. How do we all get along? We've got to learn to dwell on the important issues, and that is coming into a place of unity and these other things. It's funny how when we're approaching other people, we have a tendency to put our preferences over what Yahweh has said. You know, just because we prefer something one way doesn't mean it has to be that way. And so we need to even discern within ourselves what is our preference and what is right. Because sometimes our preferences need to take a back seat to what is right. Right? Okay. 1 John 3, 14 and 16. It says, we know that we have passed from death to life because why? We love our brothers and sisters. One who does not love remains in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. Stop for a second. Isn't this what Yeshua said? He said, if you have hatred in your heart towards your brother, that's murder. And that was not changing what the Torah said. That was holding you accountable to what it said. Because instead of just saying, well, I haven't committed murder. Yeah, but you thought about it. You've nursed it. You've held on to that. And even bringing it in and dwelling on it causes something within you that's not light. It's darkness. Okay? And so we need to be careful. And how do you get rid of the darkness? You turn on the light. You ever notice even just the smallest light can displace darkness? No matter how dark something is, you put a small light and you can see that light. And any amount of light can displace darkness. The bigger the light is, obviously, the more darkness, more area you cover, right? So again, how do we get rid of the darkness? Let the light in. Let His light shine. Verse 15, everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. We have come to know love by this. How is it? Yeshua laid down His life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for Yahweh and Yahweh alone. Oh, it's not what it says, is it? Did I misread it? No, what's it say? Lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. In other words, we follow His example. We follow His example. My life is not my own. I've been bought with a price. I have been redeemed. Because I have been redeemed, I belong to Yahweh. Because I belong to Yahweh, I learn to walk in His ways, His heart, and the way that He has instructed us in life. And that means sometimes we have to change the way we think about things, to change the way we approach things. 1 John 4, 19 to 21. We love because He first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For the one who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God who he has not seen. And this commandment I have from Him, that the one who loves God should also what? Love his brother. So, addressing forgiveness, what do we look at here? Forgiveness is both an act and a process. Okay, it could be a one-time thing of saying or doing something or acting something out, but it is also a process. Sometimes there's a process going up to the act. Sometimes it's coming up to the act through and after. Okay, but regardless, there is a process involved in forgiveness. But it could also be compared to a debt. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation as well, which we covered. It takes two to reconcile, but it only takes one to forgive. Did you know that you can forgive someone even if they haven't asked for it? Did you know that? That you can extend forgiveness to someone and they don't have to ask for it. Matter of fact, it's kind of the way we should do it. Better if they do ask for it. But it doesn't have to be that way. In other words, if we have the heart of Yahweh there with us, we can extend forgiveness to them, and we don't have to kind of hold it over them, right? So there's a process even with us that goes in here with forgiveness, and even compared to a debt, even again, what Yeshua say when you're praying, extend forgiveness so that you will be forgiven. There's a lot to that. We won't be able to get into all that today, but there is a lot to that. And Yahweh says that He will forgive, and we will ultimately all be able to come together and learn to dwell, and we will all know Him personally and have life with one another in the midst of it. Jeremiah 31:33 says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahweh. I will put my law within them, write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall each one teach his neighbor and his brother, saying, 'Know Yahweh,' for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. And declares Yahweh, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." There's a day coming when we won't have to tell anybody about Yahweh anymore because we will all know Him. We will all be in His presence. We will all be His. Excuse me. I'm going to get through this. Jeremiah 33:7-8 says, "I will restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel and rebuild them as they were at first." Verse 8, "I will cleanse them from the guilt of their sin against me, and I will forgive all the guilt of their sin and rebellion against me." Yahweh says that He will forgive you. What can we do that we cannot be forgiven of? Other than that, I mean, is there really anything that we've done that's unforgivable? The adversary will try to tell you, "Oh, look at all the bad that I've done. Look at all the things that have happened in life. And look at where, how could I possibly be forgiven?" But guess what? Come to Him and offer forgiveness. Consider this. There were soldiers that crucified Yeshua, and I believe that one was repentant. Surely this was the Son of God. Have you done that? Just stop and think about it. What have our actions been? What have they done? Have we truly been beyond His reach? No. There is nothing that you have done here that Yahweh said that He won't forgive here. So how willing are we to extend forgiveness to others? Look, Micah 7:18-20. It says, "Who is a God like you who does what? Parting iniquity, passing over transgression for the remnant of His inheritance. He does not retain His anger forever because He delights in steadfast love." See that? "He will again have compassion on us, and He will tread our iniquities underfoot, and you will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea." That's interesting as well, because consider this. Man has gone to the stars. We've gone out and exploring space, but we've yet to go to the depths of the ocean. We're always looking at the expanding and looking out, but we've yet to do what's right here. And so it says He'll cast your sins like to the depths of the sea. We're still not able to get there. In other words, you're not going to be able to go back and find them. Once Yahweh has forgiven you, you can't bring it back. You can't go, "Well, I don't want to be forgiven of that. I'm going to go get it." No, if He forgives you, He forgave you. Now we have to learn to walk in this new life that He has given us and not hear the condemnation that the adversary tries to put on you. That's where we have to stand. If Yahweh has forgiven me, I can walk free. But because He has forgiven me, then I can learn from Him and I can forgive one another. Okay? Verse 20. "You will show faithfulness in Yaakov and steadfast love in Abraham, as you have sworn to your fathers from the days of old." Mark 11:25-26. "So when you stand praying, do what? Forgive. And if you have aught against any, that if your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses." If we're holding unforgiveness, and we talked about this a little bit recently, If you're holding unforgiveness, that grows. It becomes to bitterness and resentment and anger, and it just festers in you. And you're destroying yourself by holding on to this. And we have to learn to forgive for ourselves so that we can walk in the goodness that the Father has for us and do so with a clean heart and a clean conscience. Romans 12, 16 and 19 says, live in harmony with the people you really like. Nope. What's it say? Live in harmony with one another. Don't be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Now look at this. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. A lot of times we hold on to unforgiveness because we feel there's a sense of injustice. I can't forgive them because it was wrong. And you know what? You could very well be right. It was wrong. But understand, to forgive does not mean that what was done was okay. It means you're not going to hold on to that for the sake of you growing and you learning to walk with the Father. And as we do that, we can actually be extending stuff to others that they may not realize they need. You know what Yeshua said? By forgiving one another, blessing your enemies, doing all these, you'll be heaping hot coals on their head, right? So again, how do we do that? Thank you. How do we do that? That takes a little bit of dying to self too, doesn't it? It takes a little bit of denying what we want to do for the sake of what is the right thing to do. Okay? So, when people lack the ability to forgive, they're unable to resolve conflict. Does that make sense? If you can't forgive, you can't resolve conflict. Because a lot of times, most of the time, the way to resolve conflict is through forgiveness. Okay? So look at this. The result is, what's the result of not being able to forgive and unresolved conflict? The result is division, factionalism, and fragmentation of a nation into competing groups and sects. This is why we see in the story of Yosef, Yosef's forgiveness is the bridge between Genesis and Exodus. Because if Israel had not come down to Yosef, if Yosef had not reconciled with his brothers and brought them there, understand the prophecy that Yahweh gave to Abraham saying, you're going to go into this nation, something would have been off here. Because Yosef, reconciling with his brothers and offering forgiveness here, was a bridge between the book of Genesis and Exodus. The first is about the children of Israel as a family. In the book of Genesis, we see the children of Israel. Here they are a family. But as the book of Exodus starts, we start to see them as a nation of people. Central to both is the experience of slavery. First, Joseph's, then the entire people. The message could not be clearer. Those who seek freedom must first do what? Forgive. If you're seeking freedom, the first thing is to offer that freedom to someone else. Kingdom of Yahweh is different than the ways of the world. Yeshua said, given it will be given to you, right? That's in everything. You give what you want given to you. You do for others as you would want done. It's not like, well, when this happens, then I'll do it. No, you do. And you bless. And Yahweh says that he will bless you in return. So forgiveness and the associated commands, consider this for a second. Forgiveness and the associated command to not bear a grudge is essential to the survival of society. In Leviticus 19:18, we see, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Look at this thought. For as long as one nurses a grievance and keeps it in mind, one may come to take vengeance. And the Torah emphatically warns us not to bear a grudge, so that the impression of the wrong shall be quite obliterated and no longer remembered. This is the right principle. It alone makes civilization and human relationships possible. Let me ask you a question. If you're going through life always holding on to grudges and unforgiveness and offenses, you will continually grow in these holding grudges, unforgiveness, and offenses. Because the opportunity is there. That if you're gravitating to that, if that's what you're doing, it will continue to grow. In other words, when you're given the chances to choose life or death, you're going to choose death. You're going to continue to bring that into yourself. And again, it comes into where are we going to focus? Where is our heart? Where are we going to put our focus? Is our focus going to be on Yahweh, His people, His kingdom, working together? Or is our focus going to be, well, that's it, I've had it with them, I'm just going to do it my way? And what have we learned about that? It doesn't end well, does it? We need to learn to do it the way Yahweh gave us to do it. So Leviticus 19, again, Leviticus 19:18, this is what we've said. If we're nursing a grievance, it will continue to lead to one thing, and it just ends in vengeance, and vengeance is not ours to take. Okay? This is a place for Yahweh. In the book, The 15 New Testament Words for Life, the writer speaks this regarding forgiveness. When it comes to divine forgiveness, I used to have the image in my mind of a judge releasing a criminal. But a better metaphor from Luke's standpoint would be a father who cares for his children. Stop and think about that for a second. We who are forgiven are not convicts let loose on society. We are sons and daughters, welcomed in an embrace. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and while he was filled with compassion for him, he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Understand the difference of what's being drawn here. He's saying that we're not convicts being let off in the world saying, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that, and that was wrong. I'll pay the debt for you. Just go ahead and go on. What's changed? Nothing. In other words, you're still doing your own thing, still lawless, and still going out and whatever. But if it's in the issue of relationship and like a father embracing his son, there's change there. Things have happened. Things have changed. So I forgive you, but I'm bringing you back in closer to me. Then there's a change of emphasis, and there's a change of life there because he brings his son back in, reestablishes him within the family, and then at that point, his life has changed. So it's not just like, okay, you've been forgiven, off and do your own thing again. No, you're forgiven. Now come back into the family and live your life there. Okay, forgiveness. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with, what does it mean to clothe yourselves with? That means you have to make the choice to put it on. You can choose not to, but you have to make the choice to put it on. It says, clothe yourselves with what? Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. We see references for this in Colossians 3:12 and 13, and in 2 Peter 1:3-11. In traditional thought, there is a process for forgiveness. Jewish tradition identifies 3 stages in the process. Okay, whether you are being forgiven or forgiving others, it's 3 steps that are involved in it. One is slicha, which is the act of forgiveness or asking for it or extending it. Mechila is let it go. If you say you have forgiven, then forgive. They're like, well, I forgive you, and then tomorrow I'm going to make sure you understand that I forgave you. And then the day after that, I'm going to call you up and remind you that I forgave you. And the day after that, I'm going to call you and remind you what you did and say, oh, and by the way, I forgave you. Once you have forgiven, what's the word? Let it go. Then kapara, atonement. If you can let it go, then it's covered over. In other words, I no longer have the need to bring it back up. It's done. It's atoned for. That means we're not worried about it anymore. It's covered. And now we can continue in a place of relationship. Forgiveness begins with a conscious intention to forgive, but the process doesn't end there. Because if the process did end there, then the feelings of guilt or resentment would reappear when you least expect it. The feeling of guilt and resentment would come back and come back and come back if it's just a matter of saying to forgive, but not really. Because what happens? We say, well, was I really forgiven? If Yahweh says He has forgiven you, yes, He has forgiven you. Say, was I really forgiven? Yes, you were. And we can choose to walk in His life now. And then when we learn to let it go, that means the things that try to hold us in oppression, the things that have tried to hold us back, we no longer feel the need to surrender to those things. Sometimes we look back in the past and said, well, if I only would have done this, if I would have just said that, or if this situation would have only been different. I don't mean this the way that it sounds, because it sounds kind of callous, but what happened, happened. You can't change it. You cannot change the past. But you can change now and forward. That's your choice, how you choose to live. And sometimes it's hard. I'll admit that. Sometimes it is hard. And no one is saying it's easy. Because hurt is hard to deal with sometimes. But it is our choice in how we go forward. If we can truly let it go, it means I no longer need the past to have been different. If we can say, oh, I just wish it hadn't happened. Okay, I get that, but it did. So now how do we move forward in life now? Your life is not defined by a moment. Your life is defined as you surrendering yourself to Yahweh and Him bringing healing and restoration to you and saying He will help you overcome. We have to just follow Him. And that's a lifelong commitment. Okay? Forgive and forget? Is that what Scripture says? How many people have told you, just forgive and forget? You know that's not in there. Not in there. Can you intentionally and literally forget something? I'm not saying, do you forget things? Okay? I'm not saying that. Because if we're all honest, yeah, we forget stuff. Okay? I'm saying, can you intentionally forget something? Because if you're constantly reminding yourself, I need to forget that, what are you doing? You're bringing it back to remembrance. So, biblically speaking, we see an example, Isaiah 43:25. It says, I am He who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. He doesn't say, forgive and I will forget them. He says, I will not remember, which you're like, well, what's the difference? In other words, in the Hebrew, it's different because he says, lo as kor. Kor means I will not remember, from the word zakar, which means where we get the word memorial. But literally it means to act on behalf of something. In other words, I will forgive your sin and I will not treat you as if you had sinned. I will treat you how I will act towards you as if it had never happened. That's what it means. I will not act towards you on behalf of your sin. I will act towards you on behalf of me, like that never happened. Okay? It's like, what sin? He's not saying you never did it. He's saying you've been forgiven. And He will not act on that. And that's part of His grace and His mercy. Amen? All right. Proverbs 17:9 says, whoever covers up an offense seeks love, but whoever repeats a matter separates close friends. Does that make sense? We're not saying in every offense that you just got to be okay with it. No, what we're saying is, so if someone comes and your brother has done something and they have offended you, and you forgive, you let it, you are desiring love, you are desiring relationship, you are trying to make things right. But if there's an offense and you visit that offense and you visit your neighbor with that offense and you go with another neighbor with that offense, what are you doing? You're separating. Now, how do we start off the scriptures here today? If you're not gathering with Him, what are you doing? You're scattering. In our actions and in our hearts, are we doing things in life to unite the body of Messiah? Are we trying to bring the body together, or are we trying to divide the body? See, that comes down to our actions and what we do. So, example in the story of Yosef and his brothers, let me ask you a question. Was the revelation of who Yosef was enough? Think about it for a second. Was the revelation of who Yosef was enough? See, when the brothers stood before Yosef, and Yosef causes all the Egyptians that are in the room leave, and he's just standing there alone with his brothers, and he says, "Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, Achacha, your brother." Were his brothers now ecstatic and excited that, wow, the brother is alive, and look at this, he's the ruler of Egypt. This is going to be great. They were scared stiff. Is Joseph going to take vengeance on us? We sold him into slavery. We hated him. We told stories about him. Daddy was dead. Had no contact with him at all whatsoever, 17 years. And now here he is, standing in front of me with the power and the authority to have my head. What's going to happen now? Joseph could have easily just said, "Got you now, sucker. Do something," right? Guards! Was he revealing himself to them just so that they would know what was about to happen was because of who he was? Not at all. What did Yosef tell his brothers? He said, "I am Yosef, your brother, who you sold into slavery. My father's still alive." His concern was for his family. And then he tells them, "Come closer to me." Can you imagine? After all of this, come closer to me. With what intent? To hug his brothers. To say, "I forgive you." To say, "I understand that the things that happened to the things that brought me to this point, it was God who sent me here before you. The things that happened here, though they were not ideal, but I understand that God used it. I am here now because I am in the position to save my family. I am in the position to help you now." That is what was going on here. The realization, this is my brother, is not enough. There has to be an action given here. Forgiveness has to be extended and received. And then restoration has to take place here. Because, see, forgive is one thing, but restore, that means, I'll give you what you need. Now you go back home and you take the stuff to Dad, and I'm going to make sure you're not going to starve. No, restoration. Come live with me. Come to Mitzrayim and come live near me, and I will take care of you. See, the brothers needed to come near to one another. And in that moment, if you were in that situation, how would you feel? Can the brothers trust one another? Can they respect one another? Can they offer that to one another? When Joseph says, "Come here, come closer to me," are his brothers thinking, "I wonder if he's holding a knife"? What's happening? There has to be reconciliation there. There has to be forgiveness, and they have to reconcile as a family in order to function that way forward. In order for reconciliation to happen, two things have to happen. One, Joseph has to be able to change his opinion towards his brothers. "You guys tried to kill me. I'm not going to give you the opportunity to do that again." Instead of saying, "Come closer," he'd be saying, "You go away. I'll take care of Dad. I'll take care of Benjamin. But you guys?" No, he has to change how he felt about his brothers. And on the other side, the brothers have to change how they view Yosef. Well, here comes the dreamer, telling tales about us again. Got to go back and tell Dad what we're doing. They got to change their attitude towards him. Okay? In other words, all parties involved have to change how they viewed one another, have to change how they received one another, and had to change their thoughts about each other, just like us. We need to be willing to come near to one another if we're going to build the body of Messiah. So where does the reunion of Israel take place? In exile, in Mitzrayim. This reunion of Israel does not take place in the land. It takes place outside of the land. Did you ever stop to think as well? So he brought them out as an act of redemption. He brought them out of Mitzrayim, and he brought them through the water, and he brought them to the mountain and gave them his Torah, revealed himself to them, affirmed his covenant to them, all outside of Israel. Outside of the land, they became a nation. They became a people before they had the land. See that? A lot of times we form a nation, it's a people who go to the land, and because of common interest, they form a nation and the land, right? Israel was a nation before the land was theirs. What does that tell you? It has to be a unity of heart, first and foremost. That is where Israel comes into play. Notice all the tribes are united in exile. Later, they're brought into the land that is their own, like us. We need to learn to connect and join with one another here and now before we even get to the land. Like Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet one another, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Guys, I think we see the day approaching. We need to continue to dwell with one another. Yinem hatov, dwell with one another, seek unity with one another, and build the body of Messiah. True story of Israel being gathered together. Yosef is being a uniting factor. And Yosef, are we trying to unite the body? Are we trying to bring the body together? Or are we too busy trying to scatter the body? That shows our heart. Genesis 49, 1 and 2, Yaakov calls for his sons and he said, gather yourselves together and I will tell you what will happen to you in the Yamim. Literally, he's saying in the last days. Before he dies, he calls all Israel together and says, let me tell you what's going to happen in the last days. What does he say? Assemble yourselves. People of Israel will gather together, all toward Israel, coming close to Israel. Assemble yourselves, sons of Yaakov. Pay attention to Israel, your father. Getting more into that is actually in next week's parsha. We're not going to get into that today, okay? But that's what we have to understand. Gathering together with the people of Yahweh shows what God is doing within Israel as a people, as a nation, as ones who have been set apart for him. We see this. In the last days, there will be a reconciliation of relationships. How about this? Yahweh is reconciling us to himself and reconciling us with each other. In Yeshua's prayer for his Talmidim, in John 17, what does he say? Father, I pray that they are one like you and I are one. This is not just a matter of that us being one with Yahweh, but us being one with Yahweh and us being one with each other. We say we love God, then we need to dwell together in unity, right? Does it say we're always going to get along? No. Does it say that we're always going to agree on everything? No. We all have a place of unity. We know that there's something bigger than ourselves. Our life isn't just for ourselves. Our life belongs to him. That's what we live for. Which means there are times we're going to have to see where our focus lines up with that. Jeremiah 33 and 23 through 26. It says, the word of Adonai came to Jeremiah, saying, have you noticed that the people have spoken, saying, listen to this, the two families which Adonai have chose, he's rejected them? What two tribes, families, clans? What two families did he say that God has rejected? Ephraim and Judah, Yosef and Judah. And saying, you don't hear too much about this. There aren't too many people talking about this nowadays. But when you do hear people talk about it, it's normally in the issue of, well, God has rejected that. That's not really God. But you hear what God himself says. Have you heard what people are saying? That God has rejected this whole idea and notion of Ephraim and Judah. What does God say? Thus they despise my people, no longer a nation before them. Don't despise the people who Yahweh has called out. Isn't that what Yahweh told Peter? The whole Acts chapter 10 thing? Don't call unclean what I have cleansed. And it wasn't about food. It was about people. Right? Verse 25. Thus says Adonai, if I have not made my covenant with day and night firm, and the fixed patterns ordering the heavens and the earth, only then will I reject the offspring of Jacob and my servant David, so that I will not take them from his offspring, rulers of the offspring of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. For I will restore them from their exile, and I will have compassion on them. Israel coming back together is a main theme throughout the scriptures. Not just the Torah, but in the Torah, the prophets, and in the Brit Hadashah, we see the exiles coming home. The dry bones coming together in the Haftarah for this week as well. We talked about the dry bones, the two sticks, all these things coming back together. This is what we're looking at. In Ezekiel 37, 11 to 14, it says the bones are what? The whole house of Israel. How can they be the whole house of Israel if it's just one tribe? And if this is an event yet to be, then I think we need to consider a few things. And the bones were scattered all over the valley, but yet before they came to life, what did they do? Came together. And his Ruach blew over them. They took on flesh. Spirit revived them, and they stood as an army before Yahweh. What about the sticks? What does the scripture say about the sticks, holding the sticks? Ezekiel 37, 16 and 17. So, son of man, take one stick and write on it for Judah, for the Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, joined with him. Take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel join with them. And join them one to another, to yourself as one stick, so they may become one in your hand. A couple of things to point out here really quick. This isn't just two groups of people he's talking about, it's actually four. Because it says, first off, the Yehuda, okay, that's to Judah, Livnei Israel Chavro. So to Judah and the sons of Israel joined with him. The Chavro is from the Hebrew word chaver, which means friend, association, to be associated with or joined with. But this is also where we get the word mystery. And so what we have here is this joining together of people to be Israel, but they will join themselves together with Judah. We have Judah and the sons of Israel that join with him. Then we have Yosef, to Yosef, Etz Ephraim, the stick of Ephraim, the Kol Beit Israel Havaro. And all the sons of Israel join with him. So we have the other tribes, the 10 tribes from the northern kingdom, and all those that would join with them coming together as another stick. And then he says, and you will take the two sticks, and then you will do what with them? It's translated as join them one to another. But the word that's used there is not join. It is v'karav otam. V'karav otam. What's karav? This is also where we get the word korban. What's korban? Offering, sacrifice. Literally means something brought near. So what he says is take the two sticks and bring them close to each other. Bring them near to one another, and they will become one in your hand. In other words, I can't make us become one with someone else. But if we are willing to do our job and just coming close to one another, approaching one another, like Judah approached Joseph, and this laying his life down for Benjamin. And that's what softened Joseph's heart to reveal himself to his brothers. If we can approach one another with the right heart, God said he'll make us one. That's what we're supposed to do. Can we truly approach one another with the right heart and let God make us one? That comes into a place of an act of reconciliation. Further in Ezekiel, we also find that when the land is divided according to all the tribes, it says, and in whatever land or whatever region or tribal area that the foreigner stays in, to come in. They want to be a part with Israel, even though they're not naturally born parts of Israel. But it says whatever area they settle in, become an active member in the community, have children and families there, they become part of that tribe. Ezekiel 47. What else is that telling us? That the goal of everything, no matter how we feel about like the two sticks, the two house, and all this, no matter how we feel about any of that, the goal is that we all learn to approach one another and become one in His hand. We've got to learn to approach one another. That when we come near to one another, it's not with animosity and it's not with hatred, it's not with bitterness, it's not with resentment, it's not with arrogance, and it's not with pride, but it is for the sake of building and unity. In reconciliation, it says to make peace between one person and another, and is related to substance insofar as peace presupposes reconciliation. You cannot reconcile with someone and not have this, like, and I don't trust them. In order to reconcile with someone, you have to be able to walk in relationship with them. And that's only something that Yahweh can do. Matthew 5:23-25. So now we do this. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering on the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, what does it tell us to do? Leave your offering and go be reconciled to your brother, then come to and present your offering. Make friends quickly with your opponent while you are with him on the way. Otherwise, your opponent may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the assistant, and you will be thrown into prison. Stop at this for a second. When he's talking about this situation where he says, make friends quickly with your adversary, does he ever say if you're right or wrong? So what's the underlying message here? So much as it is up to you, live at peace with all men. And whatever is up to you, do good. Agree quickly with your adversary doesn't necessarily mean you have to like agree with them per se. It means, are you trying to dwell in a place of unity? Are you working towards bigger goals here? Are you trying to serve the more common purpose? Or is it just about you being right? You've got to learn about that. So sometimes the judge makes peace between two people in a dispute. Sometimes he doesn't. What do I mean by that? If a judge renders a decision, if the two people think the judge was fair, they can come to terms within themselves and saying, well, that was fair, that was right. And then these two people could possibly move forward in a place of relationship because now that it's done, it's over, and that's that. But how often does that really happen? Right? Once you get to a scenario where you were friends and then you took them to court and then something happened, and can you ever like truly be friends with one another again? I mean, really? That is only going to take something with Yahweh. So this is why we say sometimes this happens. But therefore, the two people do not go from there as those who act kindly towards each other. They may be civil or legal, they may act like civil towards one another. They can see each other down the road, but they're not willing to be in a relationship. Father has called us to a place of reconciliation, not just, well, yeah, I can wave at him. That's not relationship. The Father has called us all into a place of reconciliation and relationship. In reconciliation, it is often the task of the offender to initiate reconciliation. However, there's also a case where reconciliation proceeds from the one offended. Case in point, Yahweh. Our sin, our uncleanness is an offense to him. But while we were yet sinners, Messiah died for us. He offered to us forgiveness, reconciliation when we were undeserving, didn't even ask for it. So how should we be towards one another? Romans 5:10 and 11. For if while we were yet enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved by his life? Not only that, but we also boast in God through our Lord Yeshua the Messiah, through whom we have now received reconciliation. We are reconciled to Yahweh because of what he has done for us. So let us live as examples of what he has done for us to one another as well. 2 Corinthians 5:17-21. Therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a what? New creation. Old things have passed away, all things have become new. Now, all these things are from God, who reconciled us to himself through Messiah and gave us a ministry of reconciliation. What does that mean? He forgave you, forgive others, and draw others to him. So that is in Messiah, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespass against them, and he has entrusted the message of reconciliation to, verse 20. We are therefore ambassadors for Messiah, as though God were making his appeal through us. We beg on behalf of the Messiah, be reconciled to God. He made the one who knew no sin to become a sin offering on our behalf, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. That's what he's called us to. In him, it's not our righteousness. In him, we can walk in his righteousness. See that? Romans 14:19. How are we supposed to live then? So then let us pursue what makes for what? Shalom, and for building up one another. Let us live our lives for things that produce shalom and building up the body, gathering in his people together, working towards that. 2 Corinthians 13:11. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, aim for restoration, encourage one another. Be of the same mind, live in shalom, and the God of love and shalom will be with you. Do you want the God of love and shalom to be with you? Then how should we act? This is what it is. So this is what we're doing. Aim for restoration, encourage one another, be of the same mind, live in shalom, and the God of love and shalom will be with you. Lastly, Ephesians 4:1-4. Therefore I, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you were called. Now, again, like we said, if he is in the light, we walk like he did in the light, right? Verse 2, with complete humility and gentleness, with patience, putting up with one another in love. Boy, we need to read that one sometimes, don't we? Putting up with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Ruach in the bond of Shalom. There is one body and one Ruach. And just as you also are called into one hope of your calling. There is one body, one Ruach. So we need to learn to dwell together in the body he has called us to be a part of. And it's not just in our local gathering, because this is only a part of the body. We're looking for his body that is all over the world that he has called us to gather together, building himself, building his kingdom, walking in his ways, walking in his heart. Though the world is dark, he's called us to be a light that shines in the darkness. When that light shines, it will draw the rest of the body to it. Amen? Okay, let's all stand. Numbers chapter 6. Yahweh told Moshe and Aaron that when you bless my children, I will place my name upon them and give them peace. And as he said, when you bless them, you shall bless them. Like this.